Admiral Catherine Hayes sat in silence, her fingers steepled, eyes locked onto the holographic display in front of her. The room was so quiet she could hear the soft hum of the ship's life support systems. Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez stood at attention, hesitant, before repeating himself. The Nexar bombardment was extensive, ma'am. New Sydney, Europa Base, and Ganymede Station are all gone. Estimated casualties exceed 8 million. The weight of those words hung in the air like a suffocating fog. Hayes's coffee mug sat untouched on the desk beside her, long forgotten. Her expression remained unreadable. To those who knew her best, this was a sign ominous one. It wasn't resignation. It was the quiet before the storm. "And the Nexar's exact words?" she finally asked, her voice calm, measured. Rodriguez swallowed hard, forcing himself to maintain eye contact. They said, and I quote, "Your species' expansion beyond your solar system is deemed excessive and threatening to galactic stability. This measured response should serve as an adequate deterrent against further colonial ambitions." A slow, humorless smile crept onto the Admiral's lips. "They actually used the word measured." "Yes, ma'am." "Interesting choice." Hayes exhaled sharply, then rose from her chair, straightening the pristine lines of her uniform. "Tell me, Lieutenant, are you familiar with the concept of sleeping dragons?" "I can't say that I am, ma'am." "There's an old phrase," she said, pacing to the window overlooking the massive Terran defense fleet docked beyond. "Let sleeping dragons lie. A warning. Some forces should not be disturbed." Rodriguez remained silent, his throat dry. "The Nexar never studied human history," she continued, almost to herself. A hush fell over the room as she turned back toward him. Her voice, once composed, carried a new weight. "For years we have been the good neighbors, the peaceful explorers, the diplomatic solution seekers. Not because we lack the capability for war, but because we remember. We remember what we are capable of when pushed." She tapped a command into her console, bringing up a galactic tactical map. The Nexar's home territories blinked in red. "The last time humans fought among themselves, we nearly burned our own world to ashes. We chose peace, not because we had to, but because we knew what we could do otherwise. We built colonies instead of war machines. We sought cooperation instead of conquest." She turned, her gaze icy. "The Nexar just reminded us why we built warships in the first place." Senior tactician Raxival of the Nexar containment fleet was having what humans would call a very bad day. "They're not retreating?" His sensory frills vibrated with mounting agitation. "Explain." Junior Analyst Techmore hesitated. "Honored One, the humans have initiated full-scale mobilization. All ships are returning to their home system, and civilian vessels are being retrofitted with military-grade weapons and shielding." That's impossible." Raxival's frills twitched erratically. Their entire societal structure is built on avoiding large-scale conflict. "Perhaps," a voice interjected, "we should have paid more attention to why they built their society that way." Raxival turned sharply to face cultural specialist Zindar. The researcher's tendrils were coiled tightly, betraying deep concern. "Consider, Honored One. A species does not develop antimatter weapons, faster than light drives, and planetary shielding just for peaceful exploration. Every piece of human technology we've encountered has dual application, civilian and military. They didn't stop being warriors. They simply found different outlets." A priority alert flashed across the command center's screens. Techmore's tendrils turned pale. "Honored One, the humans. They're activating ships we never knew existed. Over 3,000 war-class vessels, all broadcasting our recognition codes." Raxival's sensory frills flattened. "How? How do they have our codes?" Zindar's tendrils curled slightly in what might have been amusement if the situation weren't so dire. "Because, Honored One, humans are paranoid. They've been preparing for something like this since they first reached the stars." Techmore barely whispered. "That would mean, while we thought we were containing a threat, we were actually poking a sleeping dragon." Zindar turned toward the observation window, watching as emergency alerts streamed in from border stations. "And now, we have woken it." Admiral Hayes strode onto the bridge of the TDF Remembrance, the massive dreadnought humming as its military systems came online. "Status report," she barked. "Operation Wake-Up Call is green across the board." Commander Anjali Patel confirmed. "The Nexar don't suspect a thing. They still think their jamming systems are working." Hayes allowed herself a small smirk. They're about to learn why we never abandoned radio communications. She opened a fleet-wide channel. All ships, this is Admiral Hayes. The Nexar sought to teach us a lesson about knowing our place in the galaxy. Today, we teach them one instead. Her fingers danced across her command console. All ships, execute jump sequence on my mark. And don't forget to broadcast the package on all frequencies. A predatory grin spread across her face. Let's show them what happens when you wake the dragons. In a cascade of quantum tunnels, the human fleet vanished, leaving behind a single transmission racing across Nexar space. We did not build these ships because we wanted war. We built them because we remember. You took 8 million lives to teach us a lesson. Now, we teach you. Dragons do not seek war. But when awakened, they do not stop until the threat is reduced to ash. The battle lasted 6 hours. 2 hours to dismantle the Nexar's border defenses. 2 hours to breach their core systems. 2 hours for Admiral Hayes to have a conversation with the Nexar High Command as their planetary defenses collapsed. You misunderstand, Hayes said coolly, her holographic image looming over them. This isn't a negotiation, it's an education. The Nexar surrendered within the hour. Years later, Professor Hayes stood in her lecture hall, a mixed class of humans and aliens before her. A young Nexar student raised a frilled appendage. Professor, is it true your grandmother nearly annihilated my people? She smiled. That's a common misunderstanding. She never threatened anyone. She simply stated facts. But why spare us? Hayes gestured to the sprawling metropolis outside, where humans and Nexar now worked side by side. Because dragons don't just destroy, they remember, and they choose to build something better. The student hesitated. And what happens if someone else forgets? Professor Hayes chuckled, her voice rich with the echoes of history. Then, young one, we remind them,